They buried the princess on a Tuesday. The whole kingdom wept, but inside that coffin, her fingers were trembling, and her heart was still beating. Her name was Olivia, and 3 days before her funeral, she had been perfectly alive, sitting in a golden room, staring at a letter that would decide her entire life. Her stepfather, King Darian, stood at the doorway. He did not knock. He never knocked. "The arrangements are final," he said. "You leave for Kale's kingdom in 2 weeks." Olivia said nothing. She already knew what Kale was. Everyone knew. A warlord with a crown, a man who had buried 2 queens before her, both young, both silent, both gone before winter arrived. She looked down at the letter. The royal seal was still warm. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to disappear before she became the 3rd. There was one person in the palace who had never answered to the king. Her name was Mirelle, the royal herbalist, an old woman with ink-stained fingers and a garden that smelled like things that could heal you or hollow you out, depending on the dose. Olivia found her at midnight, kneeling between rows of pale moonlit flowers. "I need to die," Olivia said. "Temporarily." Mirelle did not look up. "I know." She had been waiting for this conversation for years. The plan was careful. Mirelle had a root, dried and powdered, that slowed the heartbeat to almost nothing, slowed the breath until it could not be seen. It would last 6 hours, long enough for the burial, long enough for the guards to stop watching. "There will be pain," Mirelle warned. "There is already pain," Olivia said. She took the powder without hesitation. The kingdom mourned beautifully. Silk banners hung from every tower. The bells rang without stopping for a full hour. King Darian stood at the graveside with the expression of a man performing grief, his eyes dry, his jaw tight, his hands folded like someone waiting for a task to finish. He never once looked at the coffin. That was his first mistake. His second was leaving the east gate unlocked. At midnight, 2 hours after the last torch went dark, the coffin lid shifted. Olivia pressed both palms flat and pushed. Cold air rushed in. She breathed it deep, like it was the very first breath her lungs had ever taken. Mirelle was waiting at the edge of the trees, a lantern in one hand, a cloak in the other, a small wooden box of medicines tucked under her arm. "From here," Mirelle whispered, "you are no longer a princess." Olivia looked back at the palace, at the towers she had spent her life watching through narrow windows, at the golden lights that had always burned above her life, but never for it. Then she pulled the cloak around her shoulders and walked into the dark. She did not look back again. She called herself Senna, a traveling healer, quiet, careful, capable. She moved from village to village along the eastern roads, trading remedies for meals and a dry place to sleep. She knew which leaves drew heat from a wound. She knew which teas broke a fever by morning. She knew how to read a pulse the way others read a page. People trusted her immediately. That surprised her more than anything. In the palace, she had never been trusted with a single real decision. Out here, strangers handed her their sick children and believed without question she would know what to do. She always did. For the first time in her life, Olivia felt genuinely useful, not valuable as property, not decorative as a daughter, just useful. But freedom, she was learning, has a way of becoming complicated. His name was Ryan. She met him in a border town where a fever had swept through half the households in a week. He was already there when she arrived, not a healer, but calm and organized, moving between families with water and clean cloth and a steadiness that the panic desperately needed. He looked up when she walked in and said simply, "Good." I was running out of hands. They worked side by side for 3 days without sleeping. On the 4th morning, the fever broke. 3 children no one expected to survive were sitting up asking for food. Ryan sat down in the dirt and put his face in both hands. Not crying, just still. Olivia A. sat beside him. Neither spoke for a long time, but something passed between them, the kind of silence that only forms between people who have been through something real together. "Where are you from?" he asked eventually. "Nowhere important," she said. But this time the answer lodged in her throat and wouldn't move. Ryan looked at her hands, precise, trained, impossibly steady, and said nothing. She turned away before he could ask what his eyes were already asking. She began to understand the real cost of freedom. Every time Ryan came close to knowing her, she laid another stone between them. Not with cruelty, but with carefully shaped silences and half-truths arranged just tight enough to hold. One evening, he looked into the fire and said quietly, "Some people run towards something. Some people run away from something." He looked at her. "I haven't decided which one you are yet." She had no honest answer. That night she sat at the edge of the village and finally asked herself the question she had been avoiding for months. What is freedom worth if no one is allowed to truly know you? She walked back to the fire and sat down directly across from him. "My name," she said quietly, "is not Senna." He looked up. "My real name is Olivia. I am the Princess of Valdenmoor, and I faked my own death to escape a marriage my stepfather arranged without my knowledge or my consent." Silence. Then Ryan reached inside his coat and placed something on the ground between them. A folded letter, worn at the edges, sealed with a crest she had not seen in years. Her father's crest, the real king's crest, the one Darian had buried with him. "I know who you are," Ryan said quietly. "I've known since the 2nd day." The air left her lungs. "I was sent by your father's most trusted general, Lord Evan, 3 months before you climbed out of that coffin. Your father did not die of fever, Olivia." He held her gaze. "He was poisoned, and Mirelle has been keeping the proof." Everything she thought she had escaped came rushing back at once. "You followed me," she said. Her voice was low, dangerous. "You watched me lie to you every single day and said nothing." "I was waiting," Ryan said, "for you to trust me on your own. If I had told you the first night, you would have run, and I would not have blamed you." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her father's crest and held it in both hands. By morning, they were already riding. Mirelle met them at the crossroads before the palace gates. She had been waiting, it turned out, for exactly this moment. Tucked inside her medicine box beneath the dried roots and folded cloth was a record she'd kept for 11 years. Every dose Darian had requested, every ingredient, every date, written in her careful, ink-stained hand. Enough to hang a king. They did not sneak in through the east gate this time. They walked through the front. The court was assembled for the morning council when Olivia entered the throne room. Every head turned. Every voice cut to silence. She had been dead for 6 months. She was wearing traveling clothes and dirt on her boots, and she walked straight to the center of that room without stopping. King Darian rose from the throne slowly. His face moved through 3 different emotions before it settled on something cold. "You are supposed to be buried," he said. "So was my father," she replied. Mirelle stepped forward. Ryan stepped forward. Lord Evan's letter was read aloud to every lord and court official in the hall. The record of poisons was passed hand to hand. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Olivia had ever heard. Darian's own guards did not move to protect him. They stepped aside. He was removed from the throne room in the same quiet, efficient way he had attended her funeral. Hands folded, jaw tight, and not once looking at the thing he had already lost. Olivia stood before the throne for a long moment. She had spent her entire life trying to escape this room, this weight, this crown. But she looked out at the faces watching her, the lords, the servants, the old court officials who had served her father faithfully, and then spent 11 years watching a stranger wear his crown. And she understood something she had not understood before. She had not survived all of this to hand it to someone else. She sat down. 3 months later, in the same courtyard where they had buried her, Olivia married Ryan, not with silk banners or a full hour of bells. With the court gathered quietly, and Mirelle in the front row with ink-stained fingers and a garden flower tucked behind her ear, and 2 people standing across from each other who had no more walls between them. She had escaped a palace. She had escaped a forced marriage. She had escaped death. But the bravest thing she ever did was walk back in, on her own terms, in her own name, with her own crown. And this time, she looked back at nothing. She had everything she needed right in front of her.